And welcome to our Collegiate Recovery Symposium. We are going to have a great night. My pronouns are she, her, and I am in Greenville, North Carolina. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat with the same information.
All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Joe Michael Harris. You see him pronouns. I'm the program coordinator for ECU's Collegiate Recovery Community. I also happen to be the AREG's board president. Thank you all so much for helping to celebrate us today during National Collegiate Recovery Day. It's been such an awesome time. We have a really great program for you today with lots of great information. I'll also allow my co-moderator to introduce herself really quickly.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lily Malpas. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the executive director for the Pitt County Coalition on Substance Use, and really excited to be here for the answers to all of these great questions and continuing to host events with the CRC focusing on recovery.
Absolutely. We have a great panel for you all today. Really quickly, we have with us Dr. Dominique Clemens James from North Carolina A&T, fellow pirate and collegiate recovery community coordinator. We also have, Miss Mary Ferrari, the executive director of Emerald School of Excellence in Charlotte, North Carolina, the Carolina's first recovery high school. We also have Ms. Marbeth Holmes, who who actually works at Nash Community College, and then Mr. Tim Mitchell, who is the intake coordinator for Port Health Services for all of the 3 adolescent residential units they have there. So each of these individuals have many great experiences and just lots of great information for us. So we'll jump right into it, Lily, with the first question.
All right, panelists. So if you each want to take a moment to tell us why this particular conversation is important to you.
Okay, I guess I will start. It's important to me because I've been working with adolescents in the substance abuse world for the last 15 years. And I have seen and heard every story there could be from different parents, social workers, referring agencies, kids themselves, court counselors, you name it. I've gotten phone calls of different stories. I've also seen many kids overdose, and we've lost a lot of kids to overdose deaths, lost kids to the prison pipeline. And so it is very important for me. I've fought against the funding piece. I've been on calls where people would deny kids funding to get the help that they deserve. So it's very important for me because it definitely needs to be a change. Should have been a change years ago. And so to have something like this put together, I'm more than willing to help and to provide any feedback that I can.
I'll go next. This conversation is important to me because as someone who coordinates a collegiate recovery community at a historically Black college and university, it's like the barriers there, they exist fourfold every day. It's not just, institutional racism. It's not just, lack of resources. It's not just lack of awareness. It's also, special circumstances that only befall, students who fall in a historically Black population. And it becomes really important to me to not only help educate it on their side, but also advocate and educate on the other side for other institutions or other agencies to know how to serve this population.
Hi, I'll go next. Thank you for including me and inviting me actually to participate in this. It has long been my belief that education is a bridge or a gateway to choice, to power, and to privilege. And we live in a world where those ideals of equality and justice that we talk about are simply that, they're ideals. And we know that for students of color, for students in recovery, for students who are may identify LGBTQ, we know that achieving those goals is often more challenging than for other students because there are barriers in place. So for me, having the opportunity to serve students and to empower them to reach their fullest potential and their goals in spite of and in celebration of what they bring to the table is extremely important. And community colleges in particular is a place historically where there has not been a recovery opportunity. So the work that I do in that area and with the students I serve is very rewarding to me. But the goal is always to facilitate that power and privilege and educational opportunities for our students who often have not had those same opportunities previously.
Hi, I'll go next. Mary Ferrari, and I'm working with young people in recovery in a recovery high school setting has been truly amazing. But to get to this point of almost finishing year 2, we face so many reasons why we should give up and not do it. There were so many different things put in place that made us feel like in some ways there was just no way we could thrive when there's so many things in place that aren't to support young people in recovery. And truthfully was surprised that just the simple passion and purpose around the community that has been impacted like many of us to just simply continue to push and create alternatives and be as open to all people and all platforms and pathways of recovery has been a game changer. And we get to the point now where instead of complaining, we just continue to create new ways to support our young people and young adults. And so I feel like I'd like to be here to be humbled, to recognize that a lot of people have before me gone through also different challenges and or learning from each other, how we can continue to push each other to see the hope in this, that we can learn so much from each other, but also grow stronger together. So I'm just grateful to be here and continue to be hopefully an example of hope.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. You know, I think Marbeth really hit on something there that leads us into our next question. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are trending topics today, but there seems to be a real disconnect in true equity when discussing recovery supports. What do you think our state is missing in closing that gap, the state of North Carolina in particular? And that's open to anyone.
Well, I mean, I guess I'll go first again. Consistency, funding, more people to step up and advocate. I think that's very important. Like Ms. Ferreira said, you know, it's so many barriers. I mean, they have a school, they fought for it for years, and they have a school now that is based around recovery and putting things in place to help those kind of teens to be successful due to the what would I say, the many different barriers in the way that there were people who look at those kids and kind of push them out the door and say, hey, they're just bad kids. But no, they have issues, they have problems. And now that you have a school in place, you still have different barriers that won't allow them to flourish or to thrive. So I think it's just consistency, having more people with, with voices to step up, to help out, newer policies in place, and more schools like the Emerald School of Excellence needs to be in place. I mean, if you look and do the research, I mean, the state of Texas has 9 schools of recovery. You know, North Carolina has 1, and we have the numbers to show that substance abuse in adolescence is increasing every year. So I think, you know, again, funding, consistency, more people to step up. And of course, there's always policies in the state of North Carolina that need to change.
I'd like to pick up on that because Tim said something that really stood out to me. He said, you know, they had to fight to build a school. And I think that's the problem. That's the gap right there. Why does it have to be a fight? This is a need. This is something that needs to be filled. Okay, give it to, like, and also going with, you know, the policy changes and all that stuff. I mean, there are people that support, but it's hard for them to step up because of red tape, because of having to prove this cause to one person and then the next, and then maybe you'll get some funding instead of letting us really hit the ground and do the work and support these people.
I think one of the things we also have to let go of is the expectation that everyone fits in a box that we can fund. And looking at individuals, acknowledging that substance use disorder, mental health disorders, disparities, access barriers exist, which requires us also and legislators to be willing to be accountable for continuing and perpetuating these policies that create the barriers. And I think also understanding and appreciation for the humanity of people who are not like us, whatever the us may be, is going to be a requirement in order for us to legislate policy, to implement practice, and to come from a place of tolerance. We have to understand, and understanding requires not just being educated and taught, but being willing to learn. And I think that's a great opportunity for the state.
If I could say something real quick, I love what you're all saying, and I can't help but think that kind of a big answer to this question is if we are continue to be open-minded and willing to learn as us as a united front, but just people in general, if we don't stop learning and growing, we can do pretty much anything. But what happens is through fear, through change, because change is scary, we get paralyzed and we don't continue to move forward and grow. So that's why this is so important today and tonight and ongoingly, is we continue to learn and dive into what we aren't comfortable with, and going into places and organizations and continuing to show up. It's inevitable, in my opinion, that we will in many, many ways be a voice that they cannot ignore, which is why I think we're here.
So this actually leads into our next question. Thank you all for sharing that. And this is specifically directed to both Tim and Mary, but other panelists, if you want to jump in as well, please feel free. So now that we've covered some of those gaps, how do we connect the dots from treatment to recovery high schools and then on to college or universities?
Well, I mean, again, communication is key when it comes to connecting dots. I think when we have case managers in each of our programs, and we're constantly monthly, required to have these monthly meetings with their families, and we're keeping track of their treatment and their progress. And we've already done that before with 1 or 2 kids from the Charlotte area, just referring them out to that school. It's our job, if they're in our care, to do that. So communication is one thing, and that's key. As Mary said earlier, getting information out there to people about the school, knowing that this school exists, knowing that our programs exist, is very important, because that will help bridge the gap. So, communication, collaboration, and networking, and just people with hearts who really care for the kids. If you have a kid that you're working with and you're keeping track of their treatment, you should, have the resources and reach out to these resources and try to connect those dots, because that's the only way it's going to work.
And Tim, I'll echo that. One of the biggest lessons I learned when trying to build this school was to make sure that you have this circle of wraparound services for each student we work with. So they come to us, interview, and they start attending our school. We're in weekly communication with all of their recovery supports, not just expecting it to be, oh, they're here at school getting the support here, but it's all of the recovery resources. And as a staff, we even talked this week about, you start communicating more and more, to your point, with therapists and other counselors and other organizations, inevitably just them learning about just the quality of what you're providing, it's inevitable they're going to gain the confidence in what you're doing to then refer to and bring your name or organization up with families. And I'll suggest something else that we started doing that I think is possible in every community, is starting to say, again, we know there's only so many hours in the day, and we all would love to do more outreach and more relationship building. That's probably one of my favorite things. But when you're in the day-to-day, it is so difficult to do right? With all the things we want to do. So to your point of more people coming out, but I've found that if we're strategic in creating, we in Charlotte created a strategic planning committee that is meeting quarterly now, that is of all adolescent organizations here locally, but also community leaders, because you're right, the right people need to be also at the table to hear what's happening. And also when we're talking about collegiate recovery, young people in recovery, educating kids about and families about everything that is recovery, it's hard to argue that that's a bad idea. So I think that by bringing us together and having meetings, that's a big deal, but being very open to a distinct intentional invitation to people that look and are totally different than you and I.
That is a solid point. I'm actually rearranging some things here on my end. We're going to skip the 9th question that I spoke about and go straight to question 4. So that's going to bring me to Marbeth. Being at the community college level, I believe that you see kind of the effects of the war on drugs on a different level. So I'm curious to know what impact of the war on drugs in the school to prison pipeline are you seeing? And in working with your specific populations for the time that you have been, what do you believe will take to disrupt that pipeline in a meaningful way? Marbeth, are you still with us?
Can you hear me?
I got you.
Okay. Our students in the community college are often first generation students. They're often students who have had criminal justice involvement, frequently at young ages, especially in our area. They also are students who are maybe were unsuccessful in the first effort at college and went to a 4-year school, and substance use disorder may have brought them into some academic challenges and took them out of the 4-year, and they come to us for a first or second or sometimes third attempt. To disrupt that pipeline that the war on drugs has had, I believe we need resources, knowledge, skills. We need a toolkit that includes education to policymakers. The community college system in North Carolina has an open door policy. So we accept any student who is interested in attaining an education. But with that, our students also go home at the end of the day and face different kinds of situational and environmental changes and challenges that maybe 4-year schools don't. I think we need strong advocates. We need people who are willing to be the voice of folks who aren't yet comfortable sharing their story. We need shame busting events where we celebrate the accomplishments of people who are in recovery, who are seeking recovery for the very sake that they are in college, that they are making those efforts at positive changes. I think harm reduction is a huge proponent to the success of students who are seeking recovery. And I really think we need policies that move us from a place of shame to celebration for our students, and in creating an inclusive environment and a safe environment where students feel supported so that they can thrive, especially at a community college, because often they have already failed when they get to us.
Yeah, Tim, would you like to add to that? Because Marbeth talked about, young people being kind of thrust right into that. And I mean, that's where your intersection is.
Yeah, I really appreciate hearing that. I think, at the end of the day, these kids go home, and she mentioned that, to different situations, and that's where it starts at. I mean, I've been in this field for a long time, and that's the number one. The reason why a lot of our kids are on substances is because of home life, because of what they deal with each and every single day. And they go to school, and teachers don't realize this. Counselors don't realize this. They just see the behaviors, and so they decide to kick them out of school, which is what a lot of kids want. They want to be kicked out of school. Some of them don't understand the curriculum, and some of them are getting picked on every day. Some of them have to fit in a certain social class, which is scary for the most of them. A lot of them are dealing with mental health issues that they have not been pointed out or addressed or diagnosed. And so, they're dealing with a lot of different things right now. And so it's definitely hard for them. And so more education to families for sure. Obviously more education within the school system, with the teachers, with counselors on mental health and substance abuse, so that they can recognize these behaviors and learn how to handle those behaviors in a correct way. Because there's an appropriate way to handle those type of behaviors. And the appropriate way is not to call them out in front of the whole group. The appropriate way is not to kick them out and scrutinize them. So I think more education would help with that. We have, certain things in the communities now where there's Narcan that's able to be distributed to different families and friends of families with opiates, EMS workers, local police officers that have changed the dynamics of overdose. And so it's things like that that need to be put in place in certain communities, and it needs to be more consistent. There used to be a program, I want to say a CIT, where they used to come to our program, and we would allow them to interact with kids on that use substances, and they were able to get education. The kids were able to ask them questions, and I think bridging that gap was important. I know some communities do what they call a local police night, but it's like one night, So I think a lot of those things need to happen more consistently. The more interaction you get with kids, families, and local workers, professionals, police officers, the better they get to know you. And when they approach you in the community, they know who you are. They know what you've dealt with. We definitely need more counselors within the schools. I have no idea what happened to that. When you see a school counselor today, it's more, what's your job? What do you do? Do you go to work every day? Do you see a kid when they come to your office, or do you reach out? Are teachers really referring kids to you? So I think there's so many different things that can be changed on that level that would help out tremendously. More prevention in schools. Again, I know Emerald School of Excellence, I'm sure they have all of these things in place because that's what it was built for. But we only have that one school right now. And so what do we do in the meantime? And I think that's part of it. And that's, again, there's just so many things that I think should be placed in these schools nowadays, and provided to families for help and education. Because again, that's where it starts at. What are the PTA meetings looking like? Are we just talking about grades? We talk about behaviors, but can we talk about what's happening? Can some of these social workers be placed in schools again and reach out to the families when things are happening? What happened to the old school days where social workers would get in their cars and go and visit families at houses and talk to them and sit down and show that you really care. I know a lot of families are not open to that, but it takes the right person who knows how to interact with certain families to get back to that. cultural diversity is, oh my God, can I say that again really loud? Cultural diversity is huge. You know, you can't just approach certain families with your biases, because it's not going to help any situation whatsoever. It's the most important thing nowadays, because the numbers are higher, you know, in certain ethnicities and ethnic groups. And, you know, you need to be aware of that. You need to be educated on that. You need to be educated on how to communicate with these families. So, I mean, I can go on and on and on, guys, but for sure, it starts with us. So.
And Jay, Tim mentioned something in particular that really struck a chord and resonated: professional development. Professional development, whether you're at a four-year school, a community college, a high school, a middle school, an elementary school, because it's never too young to start. But providing that professional development opportunities to talk about prevention, to talk about substance use disorder, to talk about what goes on in the families, to be trauma informed, but also resiliency building, and teach teachers and staff how to interact and build resiliency and self-esteem and empower students. And that is a learned skill. And I think that professional development in those fields is extremely important.
Yes, it is. I also just wanted to add one more thing as far as academia goes. We have a lot of kids that are low functioning too. I'm seeing a lot of that lately, and it's sad because the curriculum does not fit that. And a lot of kids don't have IEPs or 504 plans unless their families are aware that that is a resource, unless their families are fighting for that. And I talked to so many parents over the years that do not know that, or they are Hispanic and don't speak English, and nobody is giving them that opportunity or providing them with interpretation services to really talk to them about their kid. It's just they're getting pushed on the wayside, and it's, you know, it's not fair. And so to me, you know, adding other curriculum in school that benefits those type of kids, whether it's trade working, whether it's learning how to invest your money, learning how to save money. It's just, I think it's different things that can be added as far as academia goes. I mean, again, and I'm not knocking our history, but when we're still talking about Christopher Columbus, I mean, he's not here to help us. We need to add other things that are revolved around today's world and society that will help and benefit our kids that we're talking about now: substance abuse, mental health, low functioning, low income. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you both for all of that great feedback. It sounds like you guys have so many suggestions, and we just need to be writing all of those down about what we should be doing. So this next question is for Dr. CJ and Mary specifically, but again, feel free to jump in. So it's been said that scholastic recovery disrupts the school to prison pipeline that we were just talking about, but not for those which the pipeline was built. So this is the heart of the disconnect of truly equitable recovery supports. So what do you think is the responsibility of those of us in scholastic recovery to fix this? What should we be doing?
Well, first, when I envision the pipeline and the work that I do in the collegiate recovery field, it's like, okay, we've disrupted this part at the school level, but it's like they're still running and the pipeline is just waiting for the get you gotcha. They have countless opportunities to fall in these holes and get sucked back in. And when it comes to recovery supports, like Tim was saying, you know, some of these people, some of these kids that grow up to be college students, that grow up to be adults, they are still kind of at the mercy of those pipeline potholes. And it's like the thing for me that scholastic recovery should be doing, or any, you know, recovery program should be doing, is not ignoring populations, not ignoring, you know, people of color populations, not ignoring, you know, prison populations, not ignoring, you know, students who are low functioning, at-risk students, at-risk neighborhoods, whatever, not ignoring those populations because it feels like, oh, well, that they don't fit into my cookie cutter of my area, of my field of work. Like Marbeth was saying, they don't fit in that area, or they don't, you know, meet criteria, or the work is too hard. Like, we can't become exclusive when recovery should be inclusive. Recovery should be for everyone. Recovery it should be able to, be accessed by everyone, regardless of age, gender, identity, anything. So we can't possibly ignore populations. And, as our role as, providers and liaisons on the sides, we should be building these collaborations, these networks of, agency to agency, school to school, legislator to legislator, like building this chain link network that goes all the way up. It's like, well, I'm not good at talking to politicians about it, but I know someone who is. Let me push them this way so that, this policy can be made or this advocacy effort can go through a bit better.
I couldn't agree more. I almost wanted to say, you made me think of three things. Like, imagine we became more of a model for all the things we're saying. Granted, we can't do them all the time, right? But if we could be a model for the things we're suggesting for change, that's really the big step, because a lot of it sounds great, but a lot of people don't know what that looks like and what that means. And then I also thought about the importance of us, something I learned over time. We need to step out and go to people. I think we need to stop expecting people to come to us with a general open invite. We need to be ready and willing to go to people. And that I think, again, is a game changer for us to understand that because of a lot of years and years of just distrust and hurt and pain and suffering, we can't expect a lot of people to get up out of their comfort zone to come to us. So I think that's part of what we need to put on as our responsibility moving forward.
Yes, absolutely. And I know we're getting short on time. We're gonna make sure we have plenty of time for Q&A. But I wanted to kick this question to Dr. CJ really quickly. HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, have truly been a force in the collegiate recovery space in the last 3 to 4 years. And North Carolina A&T has been at the forefront of that, and it's really kind of ushered in a new way, a new path. But I think one of the things that is often missed by those of us on the predominantly white institutions campuses, PWIs, is how do we reach students of color, in particular Black students, when our spaces vastly never reflect these students. So basically, from those who get it, how do we understand it and make that happen?
I'm glad you asked that question. And I'm going to tag along to what Mary just said. You have to go to them. It's to start a program. It's more so like, well, if you build it, they will come. But if they don't think it's for them, they're not going to show up. You can put out every ad in the world that you want. We've had some success with, ads that actually look like people of color are, are more appealing, but you have to locate who you're trying to serve. You have to do that outreach portion. You have to, know what's on your campus or in your area. Do you know that you have a Black Alumni Association on your campus? Do you know that there, are a league of people of color, business majors? Do you know that? And if you do, why aren't you at their programs? Why aren't you meeting these people? Why aren't you meeting these students? Why aren't you talking to agencies that do serve, predominantly African-American agencies? Because maybe those are parents, maybe those are uncles, maybe those are students. And also, are you inviting people of color that are in this field to speak at your program, to help facilitate things in your program? So those would be, the biggest go-tos, I would say, of how do you reach students of color, mostly Black students, with your program, with your department, with your agency. And, just one, like Tim said, recognizing your own biases, that becomes important. And, not sitting there as kind of like making it a hierarchical relationship, making it a reciprocal relationship, because there are things about the recovery world that they don't, but there are things about their culture that they know that you don't. And the only way to kind of get in the middle and compromise that and translate it so that it works for them is to find them, meet with them, talk to them, exchange education with them.
That's great. So we are over time, as I figured we would be anyway. So what I need for our panelists is I need that mic drop. What's the one thing you want folks to remember at the end of all of this? And we'll start with Dr. CJ, who I'm happy to just be looking at.
Mic drop. Recovery's for everybody. Reach out to everybody. Don't stay in your own box. I don't care what they look like, how they identify. If they need assistance, you assist them because you know how.
I would say that recovery is real, recovery is possible. It is sustained through fellowship, supports, holistic supports, and collegiate resources to help empower that recovery is essential to supporting the success of our students.
I know this is an old cliche, but it's real. Children are our future. And if we don't continue to fight for them, then we won't have one. It's very important. I will always fight. I would always work with kids. I would always work with people who want to work with kids. Their insight is important as well. So include them, talk to them, show them love. I promise you they'll open up.
Mine is to continue to create. And I have this acronym, shocker, I'm a teacher. It's LEAP, L-E-A-P, to listen, to execute, to adapt, and to persevere. If we keep showing up and never giving up, we will continue to create change.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you all so much for that. We actually are now at the Q&A session. So if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. But if you would like to come off of mute and speak, you can do that as well. Just be sure to introduce yourself and use your pronouns for us if you could. Thank you.
Don't be shy now. Come on.
And there may have been some questions in the chat box. And if so, Grace was taking note of those and can ask those directly to the panelists.
Yes. So these have already been answered a little bit, but Marbeth, do you educate professors about SUDs and appropriate expectations for someone with a diagnosis? If you wanted to elaborate on your answer anymore, feel free.
We do. We have a full service student wellness center that we started when we began serving the whole student and shifting our campus culture. So we do offer clinical support on campus with a licensed clinical social worker and licensed clinical addiction specialist. It started out with just me, and now we have another one as well. But stakeholder buy-in is important, but I do believe when we can connect ourselves with the stories of our students, we are much more empathic, and creating that awareness of mental health and substance use disorder and making it okay to have those conversations in professional settings with our faculty and staff, I think has been a huge benefit, because we know the majority of Americans deal with mental health and substance use disorder of some type, either in their homes, in their families, within themselves, or their circle of friends. So I think connection is extremely important in securing that buy-in, and it has worked for us.
Thank you.
Is that information, is it disseminated to the professors, or is it more department heads? Like oftentimes you can meet with the department head and they want to hear it because it looks good, it's good PR, but then it's not translated down to professors to a practical application for students.
Our professional development is for faculty, staff, department chairs, administrators, presidents, deans, board of trustees, anybody who wants a seat at the table, but we have regular professional development on these topics for all of our faculty.
Okay.
Thank you, guys. I have another question from the chat. This is looking like it's going to anybody. What are or should be the next steps for those of us currently in public school systems?
I have a lot to say here. I don't know if I really want to go to the list that's in my mind, but I think we said some of it tonight. The professional development for faculty and families, I think, is a big, big deal. My also go-to for students, we need to create more wellness-centered programs that are not once a year, twice a year, but in the regular curriculum and programming outside of health and PE. There should also be intimate small group discussions that are provided with also counseling and support services on the regular. And that's just to name a few, in my opinion.
And Jay has placed a couple of websites that just offer some wonderful information, especially collegiaterecovery.org. Brings you to the Association of Recovery and Higher Education website. And so that has just a bunch of good resources on whether or not you're trying to start a collegiate recovery program, or if you are trying to start a recovery high school, just kind of gives you some need to know information in the FAQ section, as well as the Emerald School. You know, they have broken the ground. They know, they know how to do the work. And so, so those are some great resources.
And one more thing on the schools, I would say, come together as teachers. I mean, you grab everybody you can as a team, and you get with the board. You get into your staff meetings, and you talk and you conversate, and you have meetings with the state board when it comes to schools. But you have to make your voices heard. You have to point out and bring facts, bring statistics. I remember sitting in on with a good close friend of mine from the Pitt County Substance Abuse Coalition. And she fights and advocates all the time for people and for kids. She's awesome. But we went to a board meeting one time where there was a state legislator from schools to come down, and we were trying to fight for some services in the school system. And you would be surprised, and you probably wouldn't be surprised how that person responded to it. It was just like nonchalantly, like, no, we don't have the money, keep it moving. And so, we just have to keep fighting. We have to make a stand. We have to make our voices heard. So grab everybody you can in your school system that really care and wants to see change, and make your voices heard.
Tim, you just made me think of the fact that everything is so large, right? So the problem with consistency that I've seen in school systems for years, it is so important that we hear the message tonight that we can create the change. That Tim's saying, grab people, because there are people that care. And that's okay if it's 5 of you. You're going to be amazed at what the 5 of you can do. And it's worth the push if it's 5 of you. Because the reality of the systems being so large and not willing to hold people accountable, make things mandatory and whatnot, that's going to be a game changer for that one kid that now you can reach that wouldn't have had that service, that program, that thing that you implemented. So don't be afraid of the small steps.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In the substance abuse world, the famous saying is, it works if you work it.
Thank you, guys. Those were great answers. Another question that I have here is, are there any cultural differences, factors in the way addictions present that we should be aware of? This is going to anyone.
Absolutely. As someone who serves a predominantly African-American population, I am here to tell you that bridging the gap between what I know about substance abuse and substance, addiction and recovery clinical work means jack squat nothing to people that live it in a different way. It's part of the first 2-3 years of our program was just providing psycho ed and learning from our students. You ask a student a few years ago, well, what does addiction mean? What does recovery mean? I don't know. That stuff's for white people. that's the answer that you would get. And it looks a lot different. It looks more so like, I live in a community where this is normal. And this was even before, you know, states started legalized. I live in a community where this is normal. This is how people make their money. This is how people spend their recreation time. This is a way of life for me. What are you talking about that it's getting in the way of things I'm trying to do? What are you talking about that it's, you know, not a healthy coping skill for me? It's about taking their experience and highlighting and relating and getting these examples from them, and then relating it to, you know, the clinical lingo that we know so that it makes sense. There are huge cultural factors at play. And I mentioned earlier, you know, that a lot of our students have very special circumstances, which is why I harp so much on, you know, don't ignore a population, because there are some people out there that think that college students can't get arrested, that think that, you know, normal people don't get pulled over and killed by the police just because we know them, you know. And so special circumstances also include, like, you know, I'm trying to make it through college. I'm the first gen, and my mom and dad, they sell out of the house to pay for my education. So it's very different. And the only way to identify those differences in cultural factors is to learn, is to ask, is to, you know, sit down. Hey, explain your story to me. Like, so when I say this, what do you think I mean? Like, how do you define this for yourself? That opens up a vast array of, you know, just conversation and exploration with people.
That is very true and very relevant for us in the community college, especially at Nash, where our racial dynamic is about 50-50. So is our collegiate recovery. But the strategies that we employ have to be culturally relevant in order for them to be, in order for students to be willing to engage in that. And that does take learning. It takes practice. It takes trial and error. It takes listening to the students express what they need and how they need it delivered. And that takes a willingness on our part to learn.
I'll just add a little small piece. A lot of families of ethnicity, they do not allow and don't want people to be involved in their families and their lives, and they don't want to tell their stories, and they are afraid of what can happen after that because of what has happened in our world historically. You know, they're being punished, they're being scrutinized, they're being discriminated on. Specifically Black families, you know, they don't trust people. They don't trust people of other color. And so, you know, it's hard to interact with our families. So you really have to ease your way in and take baby steps. But if you show that you care and you show that you're not going to give up, I think with any family of color, it's going to work. So you have to educate yourself, because Hispanic families are different too. Typically the man is the head of the household, you know, and he can't, you know, you can't overstep your boundaries when it comes to that. They really look at substance abuse like, you know, it's hell on wheels. It's a bad thing, but yet they have a history of using throughout the whole entire family. You know, it's okay to sit back and do certain things, but you can't do this because this is bad. So you have to know these things. You have to know how to interact with these families. But again, it's all about educating yourself.
Very true. We actually have a few more minutes left. Mary, if you could educate us a little bit about alternative peer groups. I know that's something that we don't really have a whole lot of, if at all, here in North Carolina, but I know that's a key piece for a lot of states for the support of young people in recovery, having that support.
Sure. So alternative peer groups are almost meant to be a place where there are alternatives to your traditional meetings and programs, so that it really does encompass all people. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. And no, we don't really have any good examples of them here in North Carolina. I'd say really a young people's AA meeting is almost like the closest you get to it, where there may be some informal functions that are created afterwards to get together, but there are organizations like Young People in Recovery. We really don't have any chapters here or anything like that in North Carolina, but the dream is, I think, that if we're, whether it's alternative peer groups or recovery high schools, some of them, whether they're first or second, they need to continue to grow and be more accessible to all people all over the state, the county, the country. And really, that's what I think is going to start moving these mountains. And I think the all recovery is becoming more obvious even in our school. There's a lot of students that aren't, after there seems to be a marker right around 6 months to 9 months where a lot of young people don't necessarily want to buy into the AA and NA program and traditional programs. And we have to provide alternatives. We're literally at a place right now, couldn't be better timing to say this. We are creating our own now kind of all recovery meetings to support students, because it isn't an option to just not work a program. And it's not an option to not attend meetings and have sober community and friends. So we're creating, literally as we speak, more all recovery focused programs, meetings, and after school activities, because they don't exist. And you can, we can, I can do this. It's just, again, very frustrating that it has to fall in our lap. But it's necessary, and it is the only thing that's going to continue to push things forward, and we can continue to share what works and what doesn't. But we're just at a point here in North Carolina, we need to start creating. There are other states. I always lean on Texas because they have enough phenomenal recovery support for young people, kind of just continuum of care from treatment to recovery high schools to CRCs. So I can't help but think we all need to lean more on the organizations and states that kind of got it going on, and we can model that here. We absolutely can, but just creating alternative meetings has been a big thing that I think we need to head towards.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And I know Emerald School of Excellence is the first school of the Carolinas in terms of recovery high schools. But we do have with us as well Miss Leah Wright, who is the founder and director of Wake Monarch Academy. So we thank you for being here as well. Essentially the second program in the Carolinas. So as we're having this conversation, there is work being done, but we know we have so much more to do. And hopefully Greenville, Pitt County can be the third in the very near future. So that's what the hope is. I've dropped a lot of links in the chat for you all to check out. I encourage you to find those. As I said before, today is National Collegiate Recovery Day. And in just several weeks, we're about to have our national conference, which encompasses collegiate recovery, recovery high schools, and alternative peer groups. This is going to be a completely virtual platform. The second time now that we've done this, but we're expecting a very large crowd. Lots of great presentations. For those of you who are very new to, learning about all of this, students, there are scholarships available. We encourage you to apply for those. And trust me, being a virtual platform, we're giving out scholarships. Just apply for it. We're gonna give it to you. I can almost guarantee you that, because we want people to know about what's happening. There are so many great things happening. And if we just take the moment just to kind of, reach out and find out what's out there, I'm sure you'll find there's way more information out there than you would ever have thought. Collegiate recovery in and of itself is celebrating 11 years this year. Today is our birthday, essentially, for collegiate recovery. And I can just tell you that I've been around since 2014 when I was an intern at ECU, just learning about all of this is what it's all about. And here we are, having this amazing program and all the things that are happening. But we can't do that without the support of organizations like the Pitt County Coalition on Substance Use, our many partners across the state, across the country. And we just thank you all for being with us today. If you are here, you will receive your 1-hour certificate for general skill building from the North Carolina Professional Practice Board for Substance Use, and we'll get it out to you. Our partner also, the Pitt County Coalition on Substance Use, does have a YouTube channel where they actually are interviewing and doing podcast type interviews about once a month. That is a really great place. This particular event will be posted there in the coming days, and so you can go back to watch it. I'm sure there are lots of gems that you're trying to write it down, you just didn't get it all. You'll be able to find that there, and it'll live in infamy there. So thank you all so much. This has been absolutely amazing. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to us, and we thank you. Lily, you have any closing remarks?
No, I'm good. Just thank you so much for including us in this conversation. And thank you to all our great participants. This was really, really good. I feel like even I learned a ton of stuff tonight. So I'm very glad to be able to partner with you all.
Thank you again to our panelists. You all have a great evening. Take care.